This is Justice Matters with Tim Buxton, coming to you from Yugambeh country of the Commonberry people of the Gold Coast, Australia. I'm your host, Tim, where my sole aim is to share conversations I get to have with inspiring people doing remarkable work to create a world where we all belong. This podcast is brought to you by the Just Travel Company. Experience, wonder, and unearth justice, and discover the just way to travel today. Visit just-travel.co. Without further ado, here's our guest for this episode of Justice Matters. Hey there, Luke. Welcome to the Justice Matters podcast. Friend, it is great to be chatting with you on this bright early morning for me and late afternoon for you over in Atlanta.
Yeah, grateful to be here, Tim. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, well, there's lots to kind of dig into today because I think you and I are going to have a hard time keeping things onto one particular topic because I think we both have the habit of having a million things happening at once. And from the very first time we met in Clarkston, a suburb town, part of Atlanta, Georgia, the United States. I think from that first meeting that we got to hang out and chat before a bit of a collective group gathering, I knew would be spending a lot more time chatting and conniving up ways to serve refugees around the world. So really looking forward to our chat today. For our audience, if you could do us a really big favor, instead of me kind of trying to introduce a bit about what you do currently at Tekton, which is the company nonprofit that you founded. Give us a bit of an overview of that and maybe some of the many different offshoots of what's happening at the minute.
Yeah. Gosh, it's been almost 10 years. My wife and I, Mallory, launched originally, it was called the Lantern Project, and we were primarily funded through one private company, through a construction engineering company I was working for at the time. And we're just incredibly honored and grateful, privileged, I should say, to be able to kind of work within this for-profit construction company within the industry, and then also simultaneously working for the founder's foundation. So he was a very successful, very generous individual. And part of my job as a 22, 23-year-old right out of school was basically to help him figure out how to leverage his foundation to have a bigger, a greater impact, kind of a greater multiplier on the dollar that he was spending, for any number of nonprofits. And so that's easier said than done, as I know you know. And so we spent, probably at least a year and a half kind of in research, asking a lot of questions. I was actually living in Abilene, Texas, which is West Texas at the time, not really wanting to be there anymore and wanting to come back to Atlanta. And I, having grown up just outside of Clarkston, I knew of Clarkston, which Times Magazine called the most diverse square mile in America. And I had done short-term mission trips there for years. And so I knew about it. And I only really knew of one organization that was kind of doing anything specifically around upward mobility, job placement, and whatnot. And they were primarily doing work around purses. They were getting donated textiles, training women how to fix sewing machines. First of all, bring the sewing machines into their home, and then training them how to make these kind of high-end purses. And so it was obviously very focused on kind of the women, which it was a perfect company. It's called Piece of Thread, if you want to look them up or Google them. And anyways, coming from the construction industry, it was kind of this thought around, well, who's thinking about upward mobility for kind of more so the men? Knowing that a lot of them, and it might be the same, I guess, in Australia, they end up getting stuck in very dead-end jobs. our actual placement rates, and they call it self-sustainability in the state of Georgia, is very high. Something like 85% of resettled refugees are self-sufficient within a couple years. But self-sufficiency doesn't mean thriving. It just means they're making enough to kind of get by. And so it was kind of this idea of like, how can we take an industry like construction, where for every, I believe the numbers have gone up, but back 10 years ago, for every 5 journeymen, so skilled laborers that are leaving the workforce, we only had 1 entering the workforce. So, So we're kind of in this weird trend, at least in the U.S., where demand is the same, if not growing, because of, we need more and more construction laborers. But the supply is going down, which means wages are going up, and they can continue to demand more over the years. And so it was kind of this perfect storm of where if we could train somebody in things like welding and electrical and carpentry, they're going to get a job, and they're going to get a really, really good paying job that I would actually argue is more of a career than a job. And that's been the case. So yeah, we started about 10 years ago, focused primarily on construction, and we've had 500 plus graduates in 10 years, 99% placement rate within companies, meaning everybody that wanted a job got a job.
Wow.
Average increase in wages is something like 36%. 136%. So they're more than doubling their income usually when they graduate. And then success stories where guys are now, foremen making 6 figures on job sites. We've got a couple of foremen actually. We've got certified electricians. So again, I don't know the way in Australia, but in the U.S., when you become an electrician, you can start to demand a higher wage. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a couple of those, and welders and guys that are just making spectacular income.
I remember when we first met, you were like, "Mate, I've got these." Well, you didn't say mate. That's what I would say. You said,
I hope I said mate. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe you said, "Dude, there's these guys that are earning way more than me." And I'm like, I started Tekton, and here they are graduating. And isn't that, it's so fun? And you kind of alluded to something too. You kind of glazed over it, where you just said, look, I see this as more a career than a job, and language is important. We hear all the time, like, oh, we've just got to give people jobs. It's like we were born to just have a job, and not born to do work or to do creative work or to have a career, have something to aspire to. And for so long, I mean, for every carpenter or cabinet maker, electrician or welder out there, I mean, there's no need to look down on choosing that career path. And we're seeing now here in Australia, probably the same as in the US, this demand for trades, because, they're so needed. Yet they're also like incredibly creative people, that turn some piece of wood into some beautiful baluster, that goes into a home. And I've seen firsthand Tekton's facilities and the classroom that you have, and then you walk out and there you've got, these mock job kind of sites for an electrician and for a builder, for carpentry. And I've seen the guys you've got leading the work, which are all former refugees. It's just, it's an incredible success story. And I know, over those 10 years, it's had its ups and downs and moments of like, is this going to make it? I guess that's what it takes to be someone like you, Luke, which is very entrepreneurial, very willing to take risks, very willing to kind of be audacious in your dreams and hopes to make this world a better place. I'd love to talk a little bit more about what you do and what Tekton is doing and the different kind of projects you've got going. But where did it all begin for you? Like, what made you so passionate about wanting to kind of make such a difference in this way. I mean, it's not everyone kind of grows up wanting to start a nonprofit, wanting to be so passionate, I guess, about a demographic that in large part are very much overlooked and in some ways maligned and labeled as in very, I would say, nefarious ways. So can you give us the story of Luke, your upbringing, and why you launch into this kind of work?
Yeah, so I think I said, but I grew up outside of Clarkston, just 15 minutes north of Clarkston, in the suburbs, and in a fairly diverse community. I remember when I was in high school, my freshman year, don't quote me on this, but my freshman year, we were probably like 85%, Caucasian. By my senior year, 3-4 years or so, I would say we were very quickly the minority, and in the coolest way. We went from a very not so diverse school, kind of in the suburbs of Atlanta, to a very diverse school. And I think it's because of the proximity. Atlanta is a very diverse, very international city. And so anyways, the church I grew up at, instead of taking, we did go on mission trips, like any good evangelical would, I guess. They started to take us to Clarkston, which was really fun. I was like 30 minutes or so from the church I grew up in. And so I just remember, like, instead of jumping on a plane, having to go see the world, we could truly see the world in our backyard. And that impacted me. My father, ran a clinic for years. And then I would travel, to all over the world with him. We'd go to Peru and Haiti and Ecuador. And I just fell in love with other cultures. I fell in love with their hospitality. We say, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, Tim, but we say Southern hospitality. Yeah. Which is totally a facade. It's kind of this like, hey, come over for dinner. But that's like almost like saying, how are you now? I don't actually care how you are. And I don't really actually want you over for dinner, but I'm just going to say it because that's what you're supposed to do. That's Southern hospitality. Whereas if you go, oh man, isn't that sad? I mean, that really is the case.
Oh man. Well, yeah.
But you've been in people's homes from other countries, and the level of hospitality is unmatched. Even if I know there's really good Southern people out there who actually.
Well, maybe it's just the migrants, immigrants, refugees, those from culturally diverse, parts of the world that are reviving that Southern hospitality in your neighborhood. Totally. So maybe you can still lay claim to it. You just it's just coming from a different demographic.
Oh, absolutely, man. And there's nothing like it. I mean, I've never been so full in my life to see them slab on another, giant thing of lamb and rice and you name it. I mean, just the meals I've had with my refugee and immigrant friends are it's unbelievable. And anyways, and that just affects you over time. And I just fell in love with, having these conversations, very intimate conversations about faith and about life. And so anyways, fast forward, I go to college while I'm studying in school. I was trying to contemplate what I wanted to do. I've kind of always had an entrepreneurial bent. I've bought stuff off of eBay, resold it to my friends for profit when I was in high school. I sold knives when I was in high school. I was your typical entrepreneur, just wheeling and dealing. Sold Beanie Babies at one point when I was like,
oh my goodness,
elementary school, And so when I got to college, I was going to a private Christian school, but I actually went to play football. American football, that is, not the real football.
Well, that's a tough word. Like football in the world sense, the World Cup's on right now. They call that football. But in Australia, there's literally like 4 different kinds of football. So you really do have to like clarify what football is. So for the American audiences out there, Aussies would understand this right off the bat. But you've got Australian rules football, which is my preference. Hence why I said it first. Aussie rules football. Then there's rugby, which is rugby league, which is football. Most people call football or footy here.
Okay.
Then there's rugby union, which is another form of rugby. And then obviously American football, we would call gridiron, believe it or not.
Gridiron. Okay,
Yeah.
so I played gridiron.
There you go. Here we go.
college.
For all the Aussies out there.
For all the Aussies.
You played gridiron. What position?
I don't look it now, but I at one point was like 250
Linebacker.
pounds, which I don't know that in kilos, but I was like a fullback defensive end. I ended up playing defensive ends. That's where I was for a couple of years. And then I got injured. Started a business in college, doing pressure washing and staining of golf courses in my university. And I ended up hiring a number of guys who were all Spanish speakers. It was my minor in school, which I loved. I could just practice my Spanish with them and hear their stories. They were all immigrants with, really, really tough backgrounds. So I think that's maybe where I started to like relationally really start to develop this like sense of, well, I can see with my hands what work does. I'm seeing them send money back to their families, and I'm seeing them be able, to thrive and to be able to take care of themselves. And so I think it was a combination of all those things, but I remember I was kind of on the verge of, do I go business or do I go, like theology, do I get a MDiv, or do I just go business route?
Become a priest and change the world through that sense, or do you make a heck of a lot of money and create lots of jobs?
And that was the predicament that I felt like deep down. I just kind of was the sense of like, man, am I going to lose my soul if I go the business route, or do I have to go all in? Like, maybe it's not being a pastor, but do I just become a nonprofit leader and just devote my life to being a nonprofit and like being a life of poverty?
Why do we get thrown these ultimatums, right? Like, who says there has to be an ultimatum?
And I think that was the false narrative that I was under. And then it was my freshman year of college, and I heard someone introduce the idea of social entrepreneurship. And this idea of how can business be leveraged in a way that you usually hear like a triple bottom line or quadruple bottom line. It's like,
okay.
Go ahead.
Triple bottom line. Define that. What's a triple bottom line and what's a quadruple bottom line for me and for everybody else?
So you'll hear like, faith, usually like, how does it affect the kingdom? Like that might be more of a faith kind of perspective.
Faith-based approach. Yeah.
You might hear generally it's like how does it affect the community? So how does the business that the service that I'm producing not just make money, but how does it actually solving real world problems?
Yeah, have a positive social impact.
So yeah, some sort of social impact. The third one might be your blanking on the term, but like your environmental impact.
Yeah.
Kind of your green impact, if you will. And I can't even think of the first
profit.
one.
It's got to make money, right?
Yeah. So that's your bottom line, right? Is your profit. Is it profitable? Because obviously you can do all these other things. Is it sustainable? Is it growing? Yeah. Is it returning money to your investors, your stakeholders? And I fell in love with that concept. And obviously, at that point we only had like two examples. It was like Tom's shoes and and how'd that go? Tom's shoes. Yeah, I mean, but arguably, and I've heard people talk about. I can't think of his name right now, but I've heard them talk about him in a negative way. But I've also heard him interviewed where he said we did a lot of wrong things because we were so early on. So we just looked at it as how are giving shoes away going to hurt anybody? When in reality, it was killing the economies in some of these countries because these shoe producers were just getting demolished.
The challenge here, right, is, I love the fact that you pointed that out because that's on me for kind of automatically pointing out the negative in Tom's shoes, which we all know with every good intention was meant to try and lead the way in bringing positive social impact and change. a friend of mine, he's on our board of directors for You Belong in the USA, and he's an inventor. I mean, he's just one of the smartest guys you'll ever know. In fact, I tried to, I think, connect you with him, Jeremy Dawkins, and as an inventor with a team of designers that are looking to solve problems. So most of these problems are around social impact, creating more inclusive society and products, and the irony is, though, in his, which he kind of shared with me, is that, for every invention, for every positive thing you create, you're always inevitably going to be creating down the line.
Oh, yeah.
A problem, another problem to fix. That's just unforeseen. And no matter how much beta testing, no matter how much trialing, no matter what you do. And so I guess that's where it's so important to constantly, which I see in you, have this positive drive, right? Like, okay, we screwed up. This didn't work out. We made a mistake. We took a risk. It failed. Did it fail? It didn't go as to plan. And how on earth are we really going to know how everything's going to go to plan? I think we're coming to terms with the fact that there's just so much unknown in life and the future. But if our intentions are good, if our heart is good, and if we're willing to learn from our mistakes, we can take those learnings and keep pushing the needle forward and making the changes we all know we want to see in the world. So you're doing that. You started it with Tekton. You started with trades. You started it because you were passionate. Had this desire as a young guy to be like, wow, I'm working for this company. They're giving me this opportunity. I think that's very cool because I'm seeing a lot of kids graduating school and they're kind of almost being pushed into a kind of conveyor belt form of this is what it is. This is what you need to do. You need to get your degree. You need to choose your major. You need to blah, blah, blah. And you're kind of bucking the trend to say, hey, what is it that you really kind of love doing? Try a million different things like you did, selling knives and ripping off your friends for a good reason. What would you say to young kids out there that have kind of like, they've got that gnawing inside of them to kind of do it? What would you kind of like, let's speak to those folk out there right now.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually
actually stop me.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Again, not just young people. These could be people that are retired and they're like, you know what? I want to actually, I'm sick and tired of like wasting the rest of my lives. I want to make a difference. What would you say to anybody out there?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll say three things. And two of them are contradictory. So take that for what it's worth. I have these conversations often. The first one I would say is you have no better time than to get your hands dirty, fail often and fail fast when you have zero to maybe a little bit of responsibility in your life. It's much more difficult for you and I just decide that we're going to start a whatever business tomorrow and not pay ourselves for 2 years and to just get hit in the chin over and over and over. It's really tough when you have kids and you have spouses and you have mortgages and all the responsibility. If I was right out of school, whether that's high school or college, I mean, you fail often, you fail fast, because if you really look at a lot of these founders, and I don't mean just the profitable, super successful founders. I mean, the ones that have made impact, it's taken sometimes decades before they got it right. It's just like fail. Okay, maybe we figured a little something out here. Let's kind of lean into that. And then it's like years and years of trial and error there to finally get their place right. So I'll say that first of all. The contradiction, though, is that I also do think that there are a lot of people that need to gain meaningful experience first prior to just saying I'm going all in on the entrepreneurial train. There are things that I learned by jumping in and taking a job out of school, working for somebody else who was a seasoned entrepreneur, that I never would have, good and bad, that I never would have been able to fully understand. I mean, it probably would have gotten to a point down my entrepreneurial journey where I would have learned some of those things. But I think the timing was perfect to where I needed to work for somebody else for a period of time. So I think it's just more of weighing the situation you're in. Can you risk it? Do you have little responsibility where you can go and try and fail and, maybe get a side hustle?
Sure.
Generally a lot of the more successful entrepreneurs that I know, their endeavor that succeeded was a side hustle for a period of time. And so they got a job, not just a job, do something that's going to gain you meaningful experience that maybe corresponds to, your desire, your dream, the company or the organization that you want to start. Those are kind of my two contradicting ones. I had a third one and I'm blanking on it right now.
Well, dude, okay. So the first one is just there's no better time when you're young and you don't have responsibility, and you could almost apply that to people that the grandparents out there, right, that are retiring. There's probably still no better time, right? Their responsibilities are a little less. They can hand back the kids whenever they want, and they back to the parents after they're full of candy and chocolate and everything they shouldn't have. And, so there's no better time. Secondly, it's important to gain experience.
Yeah.
Am I saying this? It's important to learn under somebody else that's probably taken the risk and making some, creating the system so that you can observe and watch and learn, hey, this is how the real world works. This is where things are at. And you can kind of like take all of that information and then apply that to your own side hustle, probably that you're ending up going to have to take on. And then number 3.
Yes. So I should also say I'm just getting over COVID, and COVID brain's a real thing, man. So like it takes me a minute. My wheels start churning. I can get back there.
That's all right.
Well, because you brought it up, and I think that it's interesting. I can give actual examples of people who maybe would have said they're retiring or they are retired, and they're going to choose just to do something that's easy, and that just somehow through a series of events kind of landed in starting something difficult that have made significant impact. The impact that they probably never would have imagined they started having in their late 60s or 70s. So for example, Refuge Coffee. Kitty Murray launched Refuge, and she's a friend. If she watches this, I'm not even going to start to guess your age because that would be super rude of me. But I would say she probably was on the tail end of thinking like her career was probably within the next decade or so of retirement. And she decided to launch Refuge Coffee, which if you're watching this, Google it. It's incredible. It's a
phenomenal,
really neat organization. They're growing. The impact, the way they've been able to communicate the story of the refugee in ways I don't think we'll ever be able to do, because a cup of coffee is super easy to translate into any languages. It's a warm cup it's the same in Spanish, it's the same in French, and they're just going to be able to continue to grow exponentially and be able to continue to tell that refugee story. So Kitty's a really great example. Another good example for you, if you want to look up Intertwined Candle Company, if you Google Intertwined, INTERWINED, candle company. In fact, it was these 2 women from my old church. I was speaking at an event, and somebody asked this exact same question. If you, and I was probably only a couple years into starting Tekton at that point. They said, if you give any advice for somebody who has all the time and the energy and, the experience to be able to start something to help the community, what would it be? And I said the same thing then that I'd say now, and that's start really cool, innovative companies that could help provide jobs for these men and women. And they said, okay, well, what would you start? And I said, well, my family and I have been kind of playing with this idea of recycling wine bottles into candles. So, cut off the top of the wine bottle, pour the wax in, put the wick in. We were doing it for fun. I mean, it was just like one of those things. We get bored, we just create some candles. Great Christmas gifts, whatever. So I gave them the idea, and I kind of helped them get off the ground a little bit. They just grinded it and asked me a bunch of questions. And sure enough, man, these two women, both retired, husbands, retired as well, kids out of college, started Intertwined Candle Company. And I mean, I don't know the impact they're having, but I would guess they probably are employing at least 10, 15 people. And they're at every major holiday event, which is great. I mean, it's huge. So yeah, you're never too late. Find the impact. Refugees, immigrants, they just need a chance. They need need opportunities. They need connections that you have. I mean, it's probably the same in Australia that is in the US. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know.
Right.
And if you are in your 60s, 70s plus, you know a lot of people, you've been around the block or two, and you can make connections and help our immigrant and refugee friends in ways that probably Tim and I could never do.
This episode is brought to you by the Just Travel Company, your socially responsible travel concierge. Just Travel is the best kept secret in culturally immersive and justice-oriented adventures. Allow Just Travel to take the hassle out of your next trip and experience wonder and unearth justice. Discover the just way to travel today. Simply head on over to just-travel.co to learn more and book your next adventure, like our flagship Israel Istanbul trip launching out in mid-July 2023. Oh yeah. Oh man, I feel like there's so many ideas out there, and there's so many people that have the passion that they'll just put everything behind it. And if you find what you really love to do, like, you will always find a way to do it. It's like if you love surfing, you're always going to find a way. You'll wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, even if you have to be at work by 6 to get in the water and surf, or you're just gonna ignore those weekend kids' birthday parties that you have to attend to.
You're gonna skip out on something, or
you're gonna make a way, right? And that's just human nature, and and I think when you could tie that to something that is not only good for you, but is good for others in your community and good for your environment, then it's bound, I think, to succeed and have a positive impact. So
absolutely agree.
Awesome tips there, man, and insights, I guess, from your own learnings and experience. Like, you really, I admire you and look up to you as an entrepreneur. I'm a wannabe entrepreneur. I just don't have the business experience and the nous to kind of to be on your league. Is there anything else you've kind of learned in business, or what are some of the kind of things that come to mind when it's like, sneak peek into the life of Luke? What's it like to be in your world? What are the pitfalls of business? What are the challenges that you have to avoid, because business can be quite demanding of your time. Entrepreneurship can be demanding of your time all the time, right? Like, there's never a switch off moment. So yeah.
Well, I'll say, first of all, Tim, I think we're all in some capacity want to be entrepreneurs. I heard someone tell me once, a serial entrepreneur is just an entrepreneur who's learned how to fail a lot. Just fail, start over, and that I don't actually know if I want to be a serial entrepreneur. I would rather be somebody who's able to create lasting kind of generational wealth for the people around me, for my refugee friends, that continues, rather than create something that just like blows up and then dies out, and blows up and dies out.
Right.
I guess I would say, to answer your question, where I've seen, so I started after we started Tekton, we started a for-profit staffing company back in like 2016, and ran that for a number of years. And that grew, and that employed thousands and thousands of refugees across about 5 cities at one point. No, 6 cities. And it was very successful. It was a lot of fun. I learned so fast. I mean, talk about the experience. I really kind of back to your one of your first questions. Like, starting a business is going to force you to gain the experience you need to succeed. And I, like, talk about being a wannabe. Like, I was faking it till I made it. I was just acting like I knew what was going on until I figured out in some capacity what was going on. But it was so much fun, and I had a great team around me. And, I don't think there's a better, to your point, I don't know if there's a better way to live life. If you got to make money in some capacity, why not make money doing things that are actually making an impact? And that you're getting to spend time around people that you love. I mean, most of our even administrative staff that I was spending most of my time around were refugees, which was so much fun. From all around the world: Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Malaysia, Nepal. And it was just so much fun. But I will say that I think if I had to, with everything else I'm working on at the moment, and where I envision kind of some of the ways I'd like to see things go, we were never able to give ownership to our team. And generational wealth does not come from a 9-to-5. It just doesn't. I've never seen anyone be able to work a 9-to-5 and, turn around and be able to help their grandkids and their great grandkids, seek education. And, it's just really tough. I think that's a place where now, having been in the tech world for a while, which is kind of what I stepped into in the last number of years. And I have seen ownership. I've seen, companies that offered equity and ownership. And not only does it drive everybody to the same goal, like, let's all work really hard so we can grow this thing and sell it, or, an IPO, whatever it might be. I've been part of an IPO now, and I've seen where guys, men and women who join these companies early on, were able to see generational wealth by just being a sales guy, because they were able to take on ownership. And when that company had an IPO, they made millions and probably millions of dollars. And so that's what I hope for. I hope for what I'm working on now. The next things I'm working on is being able to actually give those that are like putting in the work, some sort of equity ownership. Because that's where you see generational wealth, and you see people be able to do, incredible things. Money solves a lot of issues, not everything, but it solves a lot of issues. And I think that's one of the things that's lacking. There's a lot of organizations in Clarkston doing really, really good things. There's a lot of companies employing a lot of refugees, and yet not a single one of them is ever going to give a decimal point of ownership, any sort of equity ownership in any of those endeavors, because it's just not the way it works. You have some of these companies that are like, do ESOPs, employee stock option purchases and whatnot. It's just very rare, especially in the manufacturing world. So what I hope for is as we begin to build scalable, kind of the next generation of Tekton was building Refcode. So we absorbed a software engineering kind of training path. So we do the kind of intro to software engineering. We do some kind of earn and learn type of stuff. Yeah. But we're actually launching a software agency where our goal is that we're going to raise a lot of money, train a lot of men and women, not just in Clarkston, but globally, because it's super scalable. As long as you have a laptop, you can be talking to your friend in Australia now, right? Like, there you go. I mean, you can do it anywhere in the world. Our friend Elon Musk just put up Starlink. I mean, I could be talking to somebody in other side of the globe. And not only can we provide the training with that internet, we can also help them get jobs, and they can get software engineering jobs, which we know there are a plethora of. 8 million will go unfilled by the end of this year. 8 million software engineering jobs. Those are all 6-figure jobs. And how many refugee friends are sitting in refugee camp, twiddling their thumbs, thinking about what's next in my life? How can I learn a valuable skill? How can I get a job? How can I learn English? Man, everything like that can be done through a computer.
It's at their fingertips. And I want to go back to what you said about ownership, because let's get into Tekton, Kiki Art, some of the other fun stuff that you're on to. But with ownership, man, I was just sitting here listening, and when you listen and something just starts to stir up in your gut and you're like, oh my God, this is like, you're kind of touching on something that there's a lot of people that are going to not like hearing this because they have the upper hand. But I guess in this line of work, in justice work, it's about the scale is like this, and it's about making the scale back like this. And did you notice that one can't go up without the other coming down?
Totally.
And when systems are set up, when capitalism with all of its benefits to making things grow and opportunities and all these things, though, has somehow an element of it, and there's all forms of capitalism, not kind of making a blanket political statement here, but when there's forms of things which actually say, you know what, as long as you know how to get the ownership of something, you can have a heck of a lot of other people working their butts off for you. And just because you were smart enough with the lawyer, or maybe, you took the upfront risk, and fair enough, you've got, there's a good enough reason, but for you to be, lay claim to a significant amount of the profits and the revenue.
Right.
But when you're looking at how do I give the same opportunity for somebody else to get a taste of how it is to create ownership, because the value. Money, you talked about money, like money solves issues. Well, what is money? I mean, for me, it's like money is just value. It's my time, times by my talent, whatever I'm using during that time that I'm working. And if it's like driving an Uber driving car and just driving a car, and that's what the talent I have in my hands, and however long I sit in that car driving people around is what I get. And this demand, these market forces of demand can push up, how much I can and can't charge for it. But at the end of the day, it's just money is a representation of value. And when you have an inherent worth with every single individual of untapped resource and value, and you have a desire to see, say, a refugee. Sorry, I'm going on a rant here, but and when I say a refugee, I don't mean like in any form of negative sense. I mean, this is just someone who's lost everything for no fault of their own. They're a waymaker. They've found themselves to where they are. They're incredibly resilient, smart, creative, integrous people, and you see them with untapped potential and therefore the ability to, hey, look, if you just knew that you actually could create ownership in what you're doing and actually own that which you have, that is, I believe, the next step. You highlighted it. I think you pushing into it with some of your new initiatives is highlighting the significant next step for justice to be seen in our communities, and for this world to be a better place for everyone, to be honest.
Absolutely.
We got to break up these monopolies of power and control, that kind of bottleneck at the top. We see it politically destroying countries and starting wars. We see it in businesses creating practices that are damaging to society and to the planet.
Have you heard the statistic that they did a study a number of years ago, and it was talking about happiness and money, and it was like there's a negative, like there's a positive up until, and it's not what you'd think. It's in the U.S. and like in dollars, it's something like $80,000.
Right.
Like it peaks up at $80,000 in terms of like your happiness,
happiness index. Your
happiness index. And then it exponentially starts to go back down as it continues to rise. And that always fascinated me because as an entrepreneur, generally we're focused on the bottom line. We're focused on value and wealth creation. And I'm going to drop some names. Maybe they'll listen to this one day, and that's fine. I don't mind pissing people off. People need to be pissed off more often. But like, for example, MailChimp. Probably a lot of your listeners have listened to I've used MailChimp services.
We use MailChimp. Yeah. Okay.
So
I'm about to unsubscribe from this, I'm sure.
No, you shouldn't. I mean, it's good software, but those guys just sold their company for $13 billion to Intuit. And they owned 100% of the company. And my co-founder with my company, the founder of Refcode,
Brenton Strine.
He was with MailChimp for a decade. And there was a lot of people around him. Also, were part of MailChimp for years upon years of their life. And that's what you're trading, right? You're trading years of your life for dollars. And I don't think we equate that very often. And that trade of years of his life for dollars, his bonus at the end of the whole thing was not anything close to what you would imagine. I mean, it was
well, the guy's a genius, for goodness sake. He's smarter than probably the founders 10 times over.
He built the company for them. Yeah. And yet, when they sold the company for $13 billion, and I can't tell you how much he made, but it was nowhere close to that. It wasn't even close to decimal points on that. And it's like, do you really need $13 billion? Like, is that going? Maybe they're going to be generous. Maybe they're going to give a lot of it away. But are you really going to be that much happier? I'd argue that the impact and the amount of happiness and joy and life change, generational wealth that you could have brought to the developers and to the guys who were sweeping the floors and making the coffee and whatever, that would have been a much bigger impact had they have done some sort of equity ownership, transfer or something. But that's just my tangent.
No, I mean, oh man, my mind's racing because, yeah, I mean, I was
refugees. So for refugees, you think about the type of jobs that a lot of them are ending up at. It's companies that are desperate for people now more than ever. Your chicken factories. So they're doing the dirtiest of jobs you can imagine. I mean, the people even we're placing, my staffing company, we're placing them into manufacturing jobs or placing them into hospitality jobs. And, the longevity of somebody, because the goal of an employer most of the time is, how do I get as much as I possibly can out of somebody and pay them as least amount as possible? That's really awful, but that is the equation that an employer is looking at when they're looking at an employee. And if people started to look at that different, and how can I be more generous? How can I give them a greater upside? Meaning how can I maybe I'm only paying them an hourly wage, but what if beyond the hourly wage, I was saying, I want you to partake in our growth and our profitability. So here's a vested equity schedule over a period of time. And I don't care what job it is. I think if these, like Tyson Foods, for example, owned by the Tyson family, if they wanted to start seeing exponential change in their overhead and the problems they're having with talent, they would equate 1% of that multi-billion-dollar company to the people who are doing the dirtiest, least jobs on that entire chain. And they would see change. I really believe that. They would see people who are doing very tough jobs who, at the end of the year, get some sort of distribution or disbursement. And yeah, that's where I would personally like to see businesses. That's kind of getting back to social entrepreneurship. It's not just paying somebody a wage. There's a lot of people paying a lot of people wages that are unfair, that are, they're taking advantage of people.
We haven't even started to talk about the history of slave labor,
right?
And what's actually going into the products that we buy every day, the shirts and the fashion industry. Which I have a friend that's got an incredible denim, and now branched out to other kind of clothing line company that is employing those that are from former exploitative industries, and
Yeah.
not only employing them but educating them and providing them with training on how to, you know, um, you know, uh, manage their finances
Love it.
and really,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so many positive impacts for for companies, and it kind of leads me into some of the cool new initiatives that you've started, because when you can apply this to anything you're passionate about. It can
Right.
be making surfboards, it can be like a podcast, for goodness sake,
Yep.
or like you've got Refcode, which you touched on, you've got Kiki Art, which is happening, and God knows how many other things that are stirring around in your brain. Like drop, give us the, like the 1 minute version of each
Okay.
of those things that you got going on. And then we can obviously in the show notes point people where they can learn more about it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you kind of two examples of what we're doing internally with Tekton, and then
yeah.
kind of the newer fun project that's outside of Tekton, inside and outside of Tekton, I should say. So we historically have provided the training and the mentorship for the students, welding, uh, facilities maintenance, carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, you name it. And then we've placed them in jobs. So it's either
Mm,
through staffing agencies, generally it's through relationships that we've had with employers, and yet it's never really solved the equation of how do we continue to function as an organization. They generally don't like to look at us as a staffing company, so they're not very quick to turn around and pay us for the people, because this is expensive training. We're
right.
providing upwards of $5,000 to $15,000 in value per person in training. Not to mention, when they actually come out and they're working for these companies, the financial impact that they're seeing immediately. And so we've kind of started looking at this like, well, we need to be more protective of our trainees. And if we had the ability to employ the trainees, we'd have a longer impact with each of them one-on-one. So we'd be able to start doing things like more soft skill training. We'd be able to give them more time with mentors. We'd be able
Mm,
to sit down and really figure out, do you want to do facilities maintenance your entire career? Or do you want to be an entrepreneur or whatever it might be? And so this has been on my mind since day one. We just never really were able to kind of kick it into gear until I stepped back in as executive director in January. And we had an individual who came to us who's been in the industry for a long time. And so we're actually launching over the next couple months. We're launching a couple businesses under Tekton's kind of umbrella. One is the Atlanta Door Company. So we're going to be training people specifically how to do custom door, like the actual prefabrication in our warehouse,
mm,
and then the installation. And that sounds really silly, like why doors of all things? Well, because we can control a lot when you're only really hyper focused on something like that. We can
yeah, yeah.
control, the types of training we're doing. We can control the supply, the materials needed to do so. Uh, those type of niche marketing kind of endeavors are actually really, really needed. Oftentimes the people that do end up doing doors are not like very like door focused, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that's the first one we're launching. The second
I
one
love
is,
it.
yeah, we'll be launching at some point kind of soon after that. We'll probably start really small. It'll probably be the guy who's going to step in as kind of our general manager and kind of co-founder on this stuff.
Sure.
He's
What's
going
his
to,
name?
his name's Justin.
Justin. Okay.
Justin Max. Yep.
I never got to meet Justin. I don't think.
No, this is all new, man. This is all brand new, like the last 3 months. And then the next one we'll be launching is a handyman business, because I don't know how the way it is in Australia, but handyman work is, if you can find somebody you can rely on, then you're also having to rely on their word for kind of the price you pay. Like it's just a really tough business to get into. It's very kind of unethical in some ways. And so, but it's also very broad, because a handyman by definition is somebody who can do just about anything that you need somebody who's handy to do on a home. That could be a little electrical, a little
Yeah.
HVAC, a little plumbing, a little carpentry. And so basically we're launching a handyman service under our umbrella. And that way we can retain our talent, pay them really well, and we'll probably actually kick these out as for profits so that we can give the guys vested equity in these businesses
Ownership.
as well.
Yeah. Look, I mean, my mind's already racing. Like, imagine being able to go to like a rental platform company and say, hey, look, instead of like listing 20 different, services that your renters can access when something goes wrong, and then each of those vendors, the electrical guy charges an exorbitant rate for their exceptional expertise in being an electrician,
Right.
when the job of like maybe it's just rewiring something that a skilled handyman that's got enough knowledge in that can do, probably charge a lot less, save everyone a little bit of money, and then you're not waiting 50 days for that electrician to finally come out to do their job because their demand is so high.
Demand's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's the beautiful thing of your setup. How do people see your setup? Tekton, can they apart from, I think I put up a few photos when I visited on my Instagram, but
so they can
is
go
there
to our website? I mean, they're not going to see too much of kind of these businesses we're launching yet. We're somewhat keeping it hush hush until we officially launch.
Sure,
it's not a big deal that I'm
dude.
on a podcast
I mean,
all
my 5 million subscribers are going to get a sneak peek. Head start as to what's going on. I hope you don't mind.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, and then the agency side. So on the software side, we started piloting building really basic software, kind of using low code or no code type of software development software. And the team has been crazy successful. I mean, we've done 4 contracts. And I saw them build an MVP for a startup. The startup lost the software they built that they were going to show their investors. I don't know what happened to it. It went away, it disappeared, it got erased. And they needed to build something to show their investors in 24 hours, maybe 12 hours. I think it's 12-hour notice.
Oh gosh.
Our guys built an MVP for this pretty cool technology startup in 3 or 4 hours. And we made $2,000 off of it. And so there's not many people that could pull that off. Number one. Number two, that would be affordable or have the time to be able to even accomplish that. And so that's something we're kind of doubling down on as well is, we see there's also a hole in the marketplace here because you have senior software engineers, which is what Brenton was and is, who are making, multiple 6 figures. And then you have, kind of your mid-level software engineers. And there's a massive hole Britton always talks about in your entry level, kind of how do you get your foot in the door? Well, you have to have the experience. Right. But to get the experience, you have to have had a career in software engineering or had dabbled in it, building your own thing or whatever. And so basically, the agency will provide them that 2 to 3 year experience window building real world software for clients, and they're getting paid. So we're gonna get them paid really well to build software to build their resume over the next 3 years, with the goal of I hope we see 100% churn every 3 years, where people are leaving us to go get 6-figure jobs at Google and Microsoft and all the big guys.
And hopefully there's some new big guys out there too as well, right?
Yeah. Well, and one of those is so we kind of in that process, we said, well, let's start throwing ideas against the wall because we can always start our own software company, that we could build software for with our students and see if we can raise the money and the capital needed. And so long story short, my other startup is called Kiki.
Yes,
it's actually
let's quickly talk about
anymore.
that.
It's Kiki.com. So we own the .com for it now.
Oh, man. Nice.
Yeah, so it's KICKY.com. And it's basically art. Fine art as a subscription is kind of the basic premise. We're only generally working B2C right now. So we're working with companies who are renting art as a subscription by us with our artists that we have. And so artists are getting paid residual income, while that art is on display. We're kind of coining this term like a distributed, decentralized, citywide art gallery. So I'm sure it's the same way in Australia. If you're trying to buy art through a gallery, you're going to a art gallery in a usually more upper class area.
Yeah.
And you're specifically going to the gallery to buy the art. Well, the problem is the art galleries in general are very exclusive. They take a majority of the commission when the art does sell, and the artists are not getting paid residuals while the art is sitting in the gallery. So, but you go to coffee shops or you'll go to restaurants and you'll see art hanging on the walls. And so that was kind of the premise. And so I kind of asked the question, are people willing to pay for art like we do for music now? No one buys an album. No one buys a CD. Apple's iTunes, 99
I do
cent.
buy vinyls now, by the way.
Well, that's classic, man. You're a classy man, so that makes sense.
I'm not. I've only got like 4 vinyls, and I'm like realizing, this is going to rob me of my minimal investments that I have.
Right,
if I keep buying vinyls. But yes, keep going.
Hey, there'll be exponential value. Those are investments. But we all get music through Spotify, right? I mean, music is free, but we pay subscriptions now. Like that is the premise of music. Yeah. Movies are the same way. I mean, we have Rent the Runway now. So why not subscription for fine art?
Are we going to be renting NFTs soon?
I'm not. I won't even get into that world.
Yeah,
we do.
We'll
NFTs,
save that.
But we'll
save that for another podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. So it's physical fine art. We do all the logistics. So we do the delivery, the install. It's all white glove, very professional. And most of our clients are hospitality, tech companies. We're actually about to launch a pilot with the Delta Sky Club. So if you can imagine the experience for a member of a Sky Club, you walk into a Sky Club and you see art everywhere. Generally, you can't participate. You can't learn more about the artist. You can't buy the art. And so basically, we just simply doing a QR code actually allow you to interact with the piece. So you can watch a video of the artist talk about their inspiration for the piece. You can see the value of the piece.
Luke.
You can buy it. You
This
can
is
buy it at that
amazing.
moment, or you can choose to rent it next. So eventually, we'll actually open up the door for people to then turn around and be the next. We call it host. But the goal is that the piece sells eventually. But the really cool part is our algorithms we've built dynamically set the value. So meaning that, like, let's say the artist starts off at $1,000, because of the amount of interactions that the art is having while it's in that restaurant or in that Sky Club. Or
So how many times
lobby.
someone's scanned the QR code, for example, or
Yep, then you
like
start
that?
to see the value increase over time. And actually through our technology, the artist still retains value. So, and that's actually where we kind of use NFTs a little bit. It's more like a certificate of authenticity, but the value forever lives, 3% of the value forever lives attached to the artist. So anytime the art sells, so let's just say an artist's career takes off, right now, if any of their original pieces sell, they're gonna make zero ownership in them, and they're the only type of artist. Your actors, your musicians, a lot of other artists make royalties from their art, but most fine artists, there's not a way to make anything residual
ongoing,
on a secondary art market. And so we're basically providing the element, kind of the vehicle to make that happen as well. And it's built so our MVP that we built to get into a accelerator. Now we're in a second accelerator. We're in the middle of raising our seed round. We're raising about $1 million to really see this kind of exponentially grow. That all of that was built by students from Refcode, and so we were able to pay them, give them a good hourly wage, give them the experience they need, kind of the gainful experience. We have actually a whole team that's doing kind of QA, so quality assurance kind of work, fixing bugs, all that kind of stuff. So that's the goal.
Dude.
The goal is how can we grow this, hire software engineers from the program, pay them, the $250,000 software engineers make. And yeah.
Well, I mean, the cool thing is anybody listening to this is like, these are ideas that are like the brainchild of Luke, of you, your friends, you people in your world. How many ideas are there out there? How many possibilities are there out there? They're endless. And I think once the principles that we talked about earlier are kind of baked into what we're doing here, like this is not about just how can I make a crap load of money. It's baked into, that triple bottom line or whatever it is, that ability to be like, how is this doing good for not only for myself, but for my community, for my planet. And I think, there's so many other, like, how is this creating a world where we all belong and we all thrive, right? Where everybody, if you're willing to put the work in, if you're willing to, to fail, to learn from your mistakes. And there's a lot of people out there that just, they get trod on when they fall down, and they get pinned down when they fall down. And that's just, that for me, again, it's just not acceptable. And I love the fact that there's people like yourself out there, not just kind of activists trying to like raise awareness, but actually like getting down and dirty with brick and mortar, creating businesses, creating opportunities, and bringing in the most incredible people into that journey. Our waymakers. Luke, I think we're running out of time. I hear Eden at the background kind of letting you know that she needs something. Dude, I'm so excited for you, all the things that are going on. Every time I get away from chatting with you, I feel somewhat encouraged, because I know in between our chats, there's been lots of ups and downs on both our sides, and yet you always got a smile, you always got a new idea, you always got something going on, and it's really fun to check in with you, Luke, and hopefully maybe we'll get Brenton on as well, and he can kind of delve in a bit about some of the exciting things he's working on with Refcode. I think that's something that we got to get on one of the podcasts here, but. Thanks for your time, Luke.
Absolutely. And we got to have the conversation about Australia and Turkey, and
yes,
I mean, we got to make it happen. We're gonna that's the next iteration of Refcode, is when we start to have a number of your people on the training program.
Yeah, so. I mean, yeah. So for those listening, Luke and we've been chatting a bit about how we can join forces. We met at Refuge Coffee at Kitty Murray's place there, and really connected, resonated, as I said earlier. But we want to see what you're doing, Luke. We want to champion it. There's places and parts of the world where you and I are both passionate about, whether it be Turkey, where there's 4 million Syrian refugees right now that are starting to feel the pressure of living in a country that once accepted them quite generously and is now turning against them for various political reasons. There's an increase in people fleeing Turkey to try and get to Europe because of the targeted propaganda that's working against them. They're being scapegoated. And again, what it costs us to try and invest in the US and Australia to get things started. You don't even need a fraction of that to empower
exactly.
Those in Africa, those in the Middle East, in Asia. Again, we've got the people on the ground that are have the same heart, the same vision. So, Luke, we're going to make it happen. At the right time. There's no pressure, but we'll make it happen. And I think anybody listening or watching, watch this space, because there's going to be some great opportunities for you listening to get involved, maybe serve, volunteer in in Tekton, in Refcode, and maybe overseas as well. So how can people get involved? How can they give? How can they invest? If there's business people listening into what you're doing and exciting, how can they, where do they go if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so they can go to Tekton, this is tektontraining.org, and or email me, Luke
What's
at
your email?
Tekton, Tekton training.org. That's the nonprofit email. Or go to Kiki. Go to kiki.com, KSEKY.com, or Luke at kiki.com. You can email me there. Would be happy to talk about investment, talk about expansion, talk about how Tim and I can bring laptops all across the world and provide software engineering to the masses.
Absolutely.
Because we're fired up to do it. We just need y'all's partnership. So
come on, let's do this. Hey, Luke, love you, mate. You're an absolute
you too,
champ. And you have yourself a good evening and a lovely dinner with your family, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks for making it to the end of another episode of Justice Matters with Tim Buxton. It is an immense privilege to share these conversations and inspiring people with you. To learn more about how you can get involved or learn more about today's guest, head on over to the show notes or episode description. This podcast was produced by the master himself, Jose Biotto, with just a little bit of help from me. The featured music is the song Turning Over Tables by The Brilliance. Lastly, to my Patreon community out there, thank you so much for your support and generosity. Without you, this podcast would not be possible. If you'd like to become a Patreon and get exclusive access to behind the scenes content, visit patreon.com/Justice Matters and start your Give What You Can monthly contribution today and join me and so many others in creating a world where everyone belongs. Until next time, thank you for subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. Justice Matters with Tim Buxton acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation, now known as Australia, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.